maybe give with the viewers and the listeners some background of who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
For sure. So just to keep it brief, I'm Abubakar Nur Khalil. I run Recursive Capital, which is a Bitcoin VC. You invest in exclusively Bitcoin companies in Africa through equity-based funding. I also run B-Trust. I'm one of the board members as well, where we essentially decentralize Bitcoin development in the global south in Africa. So we provide grants primarily to developers, but also developer education programs, events, etc. And separately, I work on Bitcoin Core, mostly PR reviews. And other than that, I write for Forbes, cataloging kind of the dynamics here on the ground in Africa with regards to Bitcoin. And what keeps me excited with regards to Bitcoin is honestly just the possibility of having many more people around the world giving access to financial freedom technology, essentially, which I've honestly really tremendously benefited from personally the last few years in terms of being a Nigerian and trying to keep up with being an individual that can communicate value across the globe instantly, cheaply.
That's amazing. Yeah, you can send value and I think people that don't have that use case don't get that. Yeah. I only got that use case when I started paying freelancers outside of Austria and like paying them in Colombia, El Salvador. And it's a game changer when you have Bitcoin. I pay like 70 cents, sometimes like €1 for a transaction. If the same thing happens on fiat, I have to pay 10 to 20 euros on my end, and on his end, he also has to pay 10 or 20 euros. So there's a lot of value lost along the way. If you have Bitcoin, you have an instant, and there's always no KYC and all those things. So that's a thing that I think a lot of people underestimate, that don't see the use case by themselves. So it's the medium of exchange that you can communicate values. That's for you the core value of Bitcoin.
100%. Everything else is
interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of store of value talk. There's a lot of number go up, a lot of strategic Bitcoin reserves, a lot of like borrowing against your stack, and all those financial engineering talks. When you listen, I don't know if you have listened to Vegas or you were in Vegas, but this is kind of like where currently a lot of the focus is. Is that natural, normal? In the phase that we are currently in with Bitcoin, or do you see it as kind of a distraction?
I see it's part distraction, but it's also part kind of confirmation that there is value in this space. I think like I said a few moments ago, I think it's one of those things where price is just a reflection of like the current aggregate value that people place on this network itself as a monetary network. And I think each price cycle just comes with its own share of market exuberance, which is kind of good and bad. It's good in the sense that investor appetite is really high, so you get a lot of deals closed in terms of the entrepreneur side. But the bad side is there's a lot of distractions and a lot of people trying to kind of redefine what the core value is of Bitcoin, which happens every time, whether it's as fully just store of value and everything else is secondary, or whether it's Bitcoin DeFi now in the case that we're having, or just some other way that they're evaluating what Bitcoin's value prop is, especially through like conventional TradFi means, which I think is completely not useful in terms of long-term what Bitcoin's true value should be in terms of humanity, as opposed to like what a lot of people are talking about, which is essentially just doing all the TradFi stuff, but on Bitcoin with, different narratives. But there are definitely benefits to the treasury side and all the other things. We can definitely get into that separately.
Interesting. I mean, you also see a lot, like you are, as you said, like all the things that you are doing with companies, with the developers, with all the things that you are doing. Do you see actually that price is helping the community? Like if the price rises, there's like a lot more happening on the company side?
Oh, definitely. Each time there's a lot of price action, we see a lot of people both enthusiastic, even on the dev side to a certain extent, but I see over the years, it's been interesting to see it kind of decouple. I don't think we'll get to the point where there's like zero correlation between price and people's enthusiasm, both developers and entrepreneurs. But over the years, definitely reduced in terms of like 5 years ago, it was purely just based on price. Like people only cared about Bitcoin, whether it's to develop or write code, and the price was up. But now it seems people have gone through a few price cycles, so they kind of get the lay of the land in terms of this being kind of par for the course as part of the journey.
So because people are getting used to the price cycles also have less effect on the actual business.
Oh yeah. I think right now the majority of the price action is more to do with institutional adoption being more excited than average folks that have been around in the Bitcoin space. For them, really, it's a case of like having their affairs in order. So whether it's moving a lot more to USDT or probably even the opposite, moving it away from USDT to Bitcoin for like long-term savings, especially when the dips are there, and kind of the whole DCA culture, which has formed in the last 2 years, I see in places like Nigeria and other parts of Africa.
I asked you before we started recording an interesting question, and I want to ask you again because it was interesting how you answered. I asked you before, what is kind of keeping you up at night in the last two weeks? What's currently happening in Bitcoin? Like, what's currently on top of your mind when you think about Bitcoin?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of twofold. So, when you asked, I definitely gave the company side. So I'll start with that and then the developer side. I think on the company side, it's been interesting to see dynamics unfold on the Bitcoin DeFi side. I think, again, the exuberance in this current cycle is kind of manifesting as Bitcoin treasuries, as, collateralized loans, etc., which is not a bad thing. I think, honestly, that's kind of the next evolution in terms of the next stage of both adoption, but also more financialization on Bitcoin. So there's definitely a plus there. But the issue on the kind of the pipeline side for us in terms of companies is we're seeing a lot more noise in terms of, sometimes even outright as a rehypothecation pitches, which absolutely makes no sense and kind of hurts the entire purpose of doing this, all the way up to attempts to kind of frame things from, again, like I said, DeFi, but just with Bitcoin tech, which a lot of those constructs even make sense, or even sometimes just asking simple questions like what happens when there's a liquidation event for the loans and then they're like, we'll see when we get there. That's totally unhelpful in terms of analyzing whether things will work. So I think we're at a stage where there's a lot of excitement. There are a lot of individuals that are rethinking tools and services that previously there wasn't a lot of market appetite for, which there is an abundance of right now. So I think we're going to have maybe the next, honestly, a couple of months, even into maybe January 26, where there's just going to be a huge amount of noise as long as the price keeps going up. But if we have a dip, I think we'll have some sort of a correction in terms of the focus. So on the dev side, I kind of fear that it would sort of bleed in terms of what developers see as, use cases on the ground and kind of reprioritizing where development should go in terms of focus. So definitely hope, and I am kind of very optimistic seeing things with Bitcoin Core and some of the other projects kind of not letting the market hype and all the chaos happening outside and noise kind of filter into the project itself and kind of development.
You also said something other interesting before that you said you would like to see a dip in the price to get the focus back because the price is kind of like distracting from the actual thing and building it. It's like this builders markets and bull markets kind of thesis.
And I think we either need a serious correction back to like maybe a 60K, 50, so folks can get a bit more calm, or the price can keep going up. And the hope is that a lot more people, or a growing number of people, start to refocus and understand, and kind of band together to realize that, yes, it's exciting times, but it's just a validation of the last couple of years of building.
It's so interesting when you also bring up those weird rehypothecation pitches and all the things that you're getting. We have seen this so many times in the past. FDX Celsius is not that long ago. I guess there are probably some people that listen to that came after FTX into Bitcoin, because I think it has been 2022 and you can come in 2023 or 4 into Bitcoin and maybe never heard even of FTX or Celsius. And you're like, what are you talking about? But those things happened in the past so many times. And FDX Celsius is just like famous examples of that. In the same time, there were like 20 similar companies that are failing and probably more that I don't even know about. Do you see something like that just happening all over again because the price cycles are still so high and so volatile, so that it is just human nature to try to capitalize on that and think, oh, maybe this time the cycle breaks and it only goes up, and if it only goes up, it actually will work?
Yeah, I think we'll see a combo of a variety of things. I think, history repeats itself, but not necessarily in the exact same way. I think kind of just rhymes. I think what we're likely going to see is a different version of the rehypothecation situation or the IOUs we saw. I think it'll probably be based on positions that people have taken that are too over-levered in terms of, the whole treasury side, etc. So one or two things could happen. It's not me prognosticating, but just how I see things could play out would be, on one front, we could have a correction which would likely expose those who are over-leveraged. Two, we could actually see even more price action going up, and then maybe due to some of the immediate kind of arrangements that they have on the financial side could implode. So it's kind of one of those two things. And hopefully folks aren't involved with either, or I guess overexposed with those type of two options, whether it's on the company side or some other investment or asset they're holding currently. Well, like I said, I'm very optimistic. I think there are definitely two growing camps of the really, really excited folks, which is kind of a blend of those who have already been in the space and those who are coming into the space that feel Bitcoin DeFi is now a thing. So we're getting all the DeFi folks pretty much from outside of Bitcoin coming in now. And then there's definitely that small group that's always eternal in the Bitcoin space of highly focused builders, entrepreneurs, etc. So that's kind of where the core focus is on my end in terms of what I pay more attention to.
About the builders and not borrow against your Bitcoin crowd.
I think there's definitely a lot that needs to be proved out on the borrowing side, especially in terms of the structures we have. I think a lot of them are really, they're really at the infancy stage. So not a lot of the products have been battle tested in terms of, like I said, liquidation or even some of the positions. So we'll likely have to see maybe in the next couple of months, the ones that implode, and hopefully people learn from that.
What do you think is most important that we build on Bitcoin? If we think about developing the ecosystem, what is like the 1-2 projects that you're like, okay, this is probably most important to build out for the future?
Probably cuts across 3 things, I think, or maybe even possibly 4. I think on the loan side, an interesting concept that would be nice to see people nail down is on the ethical loan side. The last 2 years, we had a lot of talk about rethinking about how loans operate with regards to Bitcoin being a deflationary asset, no need for the interest, etc. So I'm yet to see, at least on the fund side, any sort of pitch that concretely addresses that without having some of the issues we've seen with others existing traditional financial structures or products, all the way up to even just outright just copying things that don't make sense really in the Bitcoin space. And then separate to that, I'd say another aspect is definitely on the mining side. I think that's going to drive a lot, even beyond just electrification. I think it's going to drive policy here, especially in Africa, all the way up to even seeing how that could blend into artificial intelligence or just providing compute and kind of using that as a bootstrapping mechanism. So there's definitely going to be a lot going on the Bitcoin mining side as well, even as like a play for treasuries too. And then separately, I think the treasury aspect does have value. I think we have a lot of companies in Africa that have essentially dormant dollars in US bank accounts, which are not necessarily in their interest, given the fact that we saw what happened with Mercury last year, where they rug pulled essentially every founder from this side of the world, given the compliance costs. So I think it's another aspect for them to kind of explore protecting their existing liquidity that would have been idle, that would now be productively used by holding Bitcoin. And I say the last one really is just it's not necessarily a company. I think it's more to do with a frame of mind in terms of builders and entrepreneurs, which is making sure that they're building with kind of the framing that Bitcoin is money and not just a store of value, and then providing real world products and services that actually cater to a real demographic of people on the ground and not like a theoretically cooked up demographic.
How important is this money narrative versus just a store of value?
Very. I think you need to have one if you want to have the other, and having the other doesn't necessarily give you the other. So what I mean concretely is if you focus too much on the value side or, the money number go up, etc., you wouldn't necessarily have Bitcoin's core value, like I said, which is being a money maintained in a sustainable way. You'll likely see development focus shift into maximizing future returns or all these other things that maybe are kind of out of the scope of Bitcoin that a lot of people that have been involved in the space for this long hold dear. And I say on the other side, if we do keep the whole Bitcoin is a money narrative, or not necessarily narrative, but focus in terms of building and also providing value, then you naturally will have the second aspect, which is number go up. Because again, like I said, it's just a reflection of validating the former. So I think we definitely need to narrow down on that initial focus of Bitcoin is still money. And that's kind of primary thing why everyone should be building, and everything else is kind of a consequence of how well that is built.
I want to bring that up because I'm actually curious on how it's running. Maybe I'll find it quickly for you, and I'm curious on what you say to that, because I think you kind of included that in the beginning. Here it is, I think. Oh yeah, it's not a popular poll as a thought. I will just share that quickly with you. With screen window. Here it is. Share. So it's not a popular poll. Usually I get like 1,300 votes, and I mean it's just like 3 hours out, but like the 65 is very low. I asked the question: are the medium of exchange attributes of Bitcoin what makes the store of value so valuable? because it's kind of, for me, the frame of mind. It all started with Jeff Proof, and maybe people that listen daily will be so already tired of me saying that. But Jeff Proof kind of opened that question in the podcast, where what if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange? It most likely will also fail as a store of value. And you said in the beginning, for you, it's all about being able to communicate value through space and time, but mostly about the space aspect, so not the store value aspect. And I ask that because this is, for me, the most solid argument why you should care about medium of exchange, because the medium of exchange attributes is the thing that makes the store of value so valuable. If you couldn't get Bitcoin across borders, if you couldn't have it, like all those things, I don't know if it would be that valuable, just having a thing that is scarce.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of digital things that, like, it's okay, it's so big, and the mining aspect and the proof of work aspect, it's still amazing. But what if you could not transact it? What if it's just like basically number go up without the freedom aspect of it? I don't know if people would be so religious almost about it, and so the community would probably also not be so powerful. So that's kind of the question where I'm like, okay, what if the medium of exchange attributes were not there? Is the store of value then even, like, would this even occur?
I mean, not necessarily, but I guess we'll never see that play out because we're always going to be in a reality where the former came before the latter. So the actual value, which is communicating across space and time, like you mentioned, versus the other way around. But if we do end up in a situation where Bitcoin loses its core ethos, like I said, of actually communicating this value over time, etc., and over space, then I think we'll likely be in a state where a lot of the Bitcoin naysayers and some of the more traditional talking heads in some of the magazines, without naming names, wouldn't necessarily be validated, given the biggest criticism that they've had of Bitcoin is that it has no core value, which if we do miss this core value, which we're talking about, then truly they will be validated and correct, in the sense that Bitcoin essentially be the pet rock. The whole emoji will really be true at that point, where there's no difference between, a Bitcoin versus a Labubu doll, or, some other thing that is like a collectible, etc. So I think it really is very, very important. And you put it really right. And again, this is framing, Jeff and some of the others have really brought to the fore that I'm really glad to see is very refreshing, is even if you're a diehard number go up guy or girl, the idea should still be that the only reason why you have that is because of the core value of Bitcoin, which we're talking about as money, even on the mining side, is not necessarily because it's fixed, etc. It's really a case of providing, value on the ground because of the whole process of securing the network itself, but also even on the electrification side and subsidying, some of these electrical projects. So I see those are core values that have to do with being a proper money, and because of how well built the protocols in terms of being a proper money for the 21st century that's really built. So I think honestly, the financial freedom angle, if it's taken out of Bitcoin, then it becomes devoid of any sort of core value. And honestly, we're just going to keep getting random cycles of price action that's driven by things that have no fundamentals, which historically speaking, we know where that leads.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.